Sure. My name is Mike Wells. I'm the pastor presently of the Parkside Baptist Church in Mesquite, Texas. I've been there for 15 years, and I've enjoyed being with the people there at Parkside. A little bit about myself. I was raised in an Irish Roman Catholic home, altar boy for 5 years, Latin speaking Mass on Saturday evenings, English speaking Mass on Sunday mornings, was very faithful to my post, and but did not know I was saved. Believe you could work your way to heaven. One night I was at the Reese's Carnival Ground in Westminster, Maryland. I prayed several nights before because I saw some things going on in the Catholic Church, and especially in my priest life, that really disturbed me. And so I prayed a couple nights before. I said, "Dear God, if there's more to it than this, please show me." And a couple nights after that, there was a young man stopped me, asked me if I knew for sure if I died, I'd go to heaven. And I did not know that. He showed me from the scripture. I received Christ July 24th, 1979, 8:35 at night, Reese's Carnival Ground, Westminster, Maryland. Interesting note about that, Dr. Shelton Smith was the new pastor there in Westminster, Maryland, and he had trained some soul winners to go out, and they were going to the carnival grounds. And because he's a pastor that believed in soul winning and training soul winners, somebody gave me the gospel. So I always say I owe a great debt to Dr. Shelton Smith and his desire to train soul winners in his local church. After getting saved, I wanted to learn more about the Bible. Somebody suggested I go to Bible college. I wanted to be a police officer in Baltimore City, Maryland. I already had the beat, picked out. I wanted to walk outside of Maryland National Bank where my dad got mugged one night. But God had different plans. I went to Bible college. Priest came back into my home, asked my dad to tell me that they were going to excommunicate me out of the church. And my daddy said, "No, you can't do that. He's already gone." And at that time, my dad started to disassociate with the Catholic Church. Later on, of course, my dad getting saved, my mom getting saved, my three brothers getting saved. And I thank God for all of that. While at Bible college, God spoke to my heart on June the 26th, 1982. I surrendered to preach and started into the gospel ministry, preaching immediately after my calling was made sure in my heart. And I've been preaching now for well over 43 years. I've enjoyed the ministry, enjoy being around people. My first ministry was in Brooklyn, New York, and where I was an assistant pastor and youth pastor. Then Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Well, again, youth pastor, assistant pastor, pastored in Tennessee, and then, of course, was an evangelist for 12 years, traveling internationally and training pastors about how to be soul winners and build churches and how to walk with God. And then, of course, now, again, being pastor at Parkside Baptist Church.
Now, with all of that, what are some of the challenges that you faced the first year that you were a pastor?
Well, I wasn't trained to be a pastor. When I attended Bible college, I received training, and my major was in youth ministry work. And so when I was attending Bible college, I received a theology degree in theology, but also my major emphasis with the classes I took all emphasized youth work. So I wasn't really trained to be a pastor, but I knew that's what God wanted me to do because God kept speaking to my heart and showing me that's the direction I should go. So the hardest things, I learned a lot from the pastors that I was under, and I thank God for them. So I watched them, but watching them and doing that is different. Never preached a funeral before, never did a wedding before, never was an integral part of some of the most needed counseling times before. Never counseled pastors before. And so it was something that was a learning curve for me. And so just asking advice, I did that a lot. Researching, I did that a lot. I prayed an awful lot, asking God to help me and to give me wisdom instead of my ignorance. And so a lot of things were learning curves for me when I stepped into the pastorate compared to being an assistant pastor or even, an evangelist, of course.
What was it like, and how difficult was it for you, that first funeral that you did?
The first funeral I did, one pastor helped me and it was tremendous. He said, when you do a funeral, of course, it's a time to honor the departed. If they're saved, it's easier to preach the funeral of a saved person. But he said, keep in mind, they're already in heaven. They don't need your comfort. The people that need your comfort the most is the people sitting in the pews. And so every funeral I've ever preached, I preached to help people understand the comfort that they could receive, knowing that that person that has departed, that person that has died, again, if they're saved, they're in heaven. And then I would branch off of that, giving a salvation message about how they also could go to heaven. In dealing with somebody that was lost, and I preached to many funerals of lost people. A matter of fact, I do funerals often where I pastor because I don't do funerals just of our people. I've gone to funeral homes and they have my name in funeral homes. So I preach the funerals for people that I don't even know, and it's a perfect opportunity to be able to give the gospel. But in that case, I'll be honest, I don't know if, because I don't know the person. I was asked by the family to preach the funeral, and I love them, and I appreciate getting to know them over the past couple of days or hours that we've met. But I do know this, that it's God's will that everybody know how to go to heaven. And I hope that one day, and according to maybe a family member or somebody else, they may have hopes that the person is in heaven. But I do know this, if they're in heaven, they want you to come. I do know this, if they're in hell, they don't want you to come. And so let me just tell you how to go to heaven, and I would use that to be able to give the gospel.
What are some experiences that led you to the position that you're in now? God, especially things that would happen in your own life that led you to the position you're in today?
I think that God uses things in our lives to prepare us for not just what we face today, but I think that God uses everything in our life today, and He uses everything in our life yesteryear to prepare us for tomorrow. And I think, of course, being the president of a Bible college, now in 70, having 72 different colleges that we have overseas, 35 different countries, and having so many students, I think the trail leading up to that was a trail of preparation. And I think that everything that we go through is God preparing us, again, not for just what we face today, but also what we're going to face tomorrow. And if we look at life from that perspective, then every day is a day of learning. Every day is a day of growing. And we'll never stop learning. We'll never stop growing, you know, and it's a marvelous thing to be able to grow and to be able to learn. If you were to come to my church, and certainly you're invited to do so, but if you were to walk into my office or even pick up my Bible, in the flyleaf of every Bible, it says, pray for God's power and pray for God's wisdom. I don't want Mike Wells's power, and I don't want Mike Wells's wisdom. And it's only by God's grace that you and I, as pastors and other people that serve Christ, is able to do the work of the ministry. But we ought not to do it in the arm of the flesh, because it will fail us. And so I think that the things that prepare us for tomorrow is the trail that we walk down today.
What are some of the skills that you have that have been most beneficial for you?
Some of the skills I have that might be most beneficial is I learned years ago how to administrate and delegate. There are things that a pastor can do that only a pastor can do. But there's other things that everyone can do. Everyone could straighten up the hymn books in the church auditorium. Everyone can do that, but not everyone can study for a sermon. everyone could be able to participate in mowing the grass lawn or caring for the facilities of the church or the college or the campus, but not that's not something that only the pastor should do. So I learned to be an administrator. And the larger that the church grows, the more you have to in-op your administrative ability, the more you have to be able to delegate with a large degree of trust, and then be able to give responsibility, walk away from it. If they need your help, that's great. You can come back and help them, guide them, give them wisdom. Uh, but you cannot, you ever see the man that tries to spin all the plates? And if you get too many plates out there, eventually, I don't care how fast you are, I don't care how much physical strength you have, doesn't matter how much wisdom you have, some of those plates are going to fall. So we have to learn as our churches grow to learn to administrate, learn to delegate. That doesn't mean you take your hands off. Anything that you give as a responsibility certainly ought to be inspected, and make sure it does, come up to a certain degree of par, if you would, that you have in your anticipation and expectancy as to how that should be fulfilled. But I think sometimes pastors try and do it all. They want to touch it, they want to hold it, sometimes they want to sleep with it. And that causes a large degree of stress. So I think as we grow in the Lord and we grow in trusting Him, it helps us to trust others as well. That is also in His hands. So I think administrative and delegation is a big, big thing.
What would you get, or what would you say to get people to help?
Well, Jesus lifted up His eyes, right? Looked on the multitudes. Then, it says, then He was moved with compassion. I think we have to take the people to the fields of opportunities to help them to see that God could use them. Example, when I was a pastor in Tennessee, we had 4 bus routes. I started all 4 of those bus routes, but I already had a man in mind that I thought could be a good bus captain. So I took him on the trip. He came on the journey with me of starting those bus routes. We would always start bus routes on a Saturday. We'd take a bus to an area, and we would have sort of like a little vacation Bible school on the bus on Saturday, passing out flyers with great excitability of trying to get people to get on the bus. We'd have a program on the bus. Then we'd ask, of course, the people on the bus, whether they be children, teenagers, or whether they would be adults. How many would like to come to church tomorrow? Raise your hand. Then I'd take those to, if it was a child, of course, to their parents, and then would sign a permission form for them to ride the bus. Same with a teenager, or I get the information about the adult and write it down. And most of the bus routes we ever started, we always started with 20 or 30 riders the very first Sunday, because we did those programs on Saturday, taking buses to areas. So, how do you get somebody to take on a responsibility? Walk beside them, whether it's mowing the lawn. Hey, let me show you how I'd like for you to do this. I think you could do it, and putting confidence in them. Now, a lot of people, they look at church as being with great respect. They want it to be done right. So sometimes they're a little bit feeling awkward about how to do it. And so to walk beside them, give them confidence, admonition, encouragement, that's a big help.
For somebody who's maybe thinking, I want to serve in my church, what could they do?
I think it depends on where they are spiritually. Example, you don't want to put somebody up teaching a Sunday school class that has a smoking problem, or that has a cursing problem, where they get up and all of a sudden they lose their temper and they curse at the children. You want to make sure that they have the spiritual growth. You want to make sure that they have the spiritual fortitude. You want to make sure that they're there. I've always, we have a large soul winning program. We will average sometimes 200 soul winners going out a week. And I choose my Sunday school teachers from the soul winning crowd. They already have a heart for God. I've often said this: if you won't make a visit for God, you're not going to make a visit for Mike. But if they're already making visits, they're already going out soul winning, then they won't have any problems as a Sunday school teacher making visits. So I would always choose our Sunday school teachers from the soul winning crowd, those that already have a desire to be able to go out, those that will go out and be able to see people saved, those that visit people and follow up. I tried to do that. And so,
What are some skills that you would suggest for somebody who wants to go into the ministry?
some skills that a person ought to have or try to have to go in the ministry, I think, starts with desire. The Bible says that if a man desires the office of a bishop, he desireth a good thing. So if a person desires to go into the ministry, I think that's a good thing, you know. And I think let your desire be able to regulate, be able to guide you in the things that now you can do. Example, if you're going to ride a bike, you're going to probably have some ups and downs the first time you get on it, may fall off of it, may crash into something, may fall, if you would please, and even get hurt. But that's okay. That's the process of learning to ride a bike. So please understand, if a person gets in the ministry, they might fall down, they might fall off, they might get hurt, but eventually they'll learn how to pedal the bike. So I think, first off, give yourself grace if you're trying to get in the ministry. There's no perfect guys. You see these preachers that's been in it a long time. They've got a lot of scars. They've got a lot of bumps. They've made some wrong decisions. They've learned from decisions and they're still at it. And that should give you hope that, wow, I can be in this for the rest of the days of my life, longevity. But I think it starts with desire. If you have a desire, go to your pastor. Pastor, I have a desire to be a soul winner. Can you help me? I have a desire to be a Sunday school teacher. Can you help me? Can you train me? I have a desire to be able to be an usher. Can you help me? Can you train me? When somebody becomes a member of Parkside, inside the membership bag, they get a piece of paper. It's called Search for Servants. And the new members would check what they have a desire to do. And again, talking about desire, then we can be able to work with them to help them be able to grow and mature so that they can fulfill those desires.
What is one thing that you want people to know about you, your family, and your ministry?
To know about me, I would say this: you pray for me. That's what I would want you to do, to know that Mike Wells and his family need prayer. And so if you could put me on your prayer list, that would be great.
Amen.
To know about me is, I don't know, I love to help people. I do. I love soul winning. I love to tell people about Christ. I love to follow people up. I love to help preachers. That's why I travel so much. That's why I go overseas so many times, and we do pastors' conferences and couples retreats and all sorts of stuff, just because we love people. And so certainly I would extend that to you that's watching. If we could ever be a help or a blessing to you, then certainly, we want to try and do that.
What is the most meaningful part of being a pastor?
Helping people on a consistent basis. If you were to ask me now, of course, this is just you and I talking. So maybe if you were to talk to another guy, it might be something different. I was an evangelist. When I would go to be an evangelist, the auditoriums would fill up. Sometimes people would bring people from other churches in vans or buses or whatever. And it was always the highlight. It was the thrill. But I never got to see the people grow because I'm only going to be with them for 5 days. Then I go to another meeting, another conference, another revival gathering, if you would. I think one of the things I've enjoyed in being a pastor is to be there to help the people through their low times and through their times of plentifulness, to be their counselor, to walk beside them, to marry them, to be able to watch them have children, to teach them biblical principles of child rearing, and to watch them to be able to put those principles into their lives and see God's word being fully a blessing to them as they obey Bible principles in their child rearing endeavors. And just to be with the people, watch them grow, walk beside them. As an evangelist, you get to see the big numbers. You do. You get to see hundreds and hundreds of people walk in the aisle, receiving Christ as Savior. You get to see people called into the ministry. But the only thing you don't get to see, is you don't get to see the individual day-to-day growth that you do get to see as a pastor. So I enjoy that aspect of pastoring.
Was there ever a time in evangelism or any other time where you would maybe preach in a place, come back the next year, you would see that person a year later, and then there was some kind of a growth that you could visibly?
Oh yes. Many times as an evangelist, I go soul winning every day, and we would get to see people come to know Christ. We get people in church for that week's revival. And they get baptized, they become members of the church, and then you go back the next year and they're still there. You go back the next year and they're serving Christ. I cannot begin to tell you how many people that we have had the privilege to lead to Christ that went on to Bible college, that are now in the ministry, and it's a joy. Paul talked about fruit that remains. And when you stay in the ministry a long time, no matter if it's the pastorate, no matter if it's the field of evangelism, no matter if it's a missionary, no matter if it's in Christian education, I'd encourage you, just stay, serve Christ through the high times and the low times, because eventually, as you get a little bit older, you get to see the fruit of that and the fruit that remains. And as a preacher, I had the blessing to preach in churches all over the world of young men that walked an aisle, surrendered under me. Now they're pastoring. And, it's a blessing to be able to see. Certainly that fruit that remains would probably be the top of the list. That is such a blessing.
Who is your favorite preacher from the past?
Favorite preacher from the past? Well, preacher is a singular word. I'd have to, if I may, with your permission, change it to preachers. Lee Robertson was a personal friend. I had the privilege to preach with Dr. Robertson on a couple of occasions. Dr. Carl Hatch and we preached together in the last 5 years of his life. These two men have gone to heaven. Dr. Jack Hiles, of course, I'd gone to many of the pastor schools and had the privilege to teach some classes for him at some of those schools he had. I learned a lot from him. Just different ones that have gone on to be with the Lord, that I'm thinking about, that are men of old. I think about Dr. Tom Malone. Dr. Tom Malone, he had that raspy voice. He wore those blue glasses because his wife liked the blue glasses. He was called the Prince of Preachers of those days. Dr. Curtis Hudson personally took me under his wing and taught me about personal soul winning. And we've been soul winning many times together. He preached in my pulpit, and when I was a pastor, and became a very personal friend. Just different ones, over the years. Harold Seitler, pastored and did a great work there. And I'd read his books. He was an excellent writer, and he influenced me. When I got saved, of course, I got saved in 79. Dr. Rice, I believe, if I remember correctly, went to heaven in 1980. So I never met Dr. John L. Rice, but I'd watched him on video or whatever, or heard him on a tape recording preaching. He had a big influence in my life, even though he passed on. Dr. Bill Rice, I think he died in 1976. And Dr. Bill Rice was a big influence in my life, and I would listen to him on cassette recordings and stuff like that. And, you had Mays Jackson. I love to hear him preach. And Percy Ray, I love to hear him preach. And just so many different ones, and many of these guys, as you mentioned in your question, have been men that have passed on. They're no longer with us, but the influence they had in my life, Lester Roloff with his faith and the crazy airplane experiences that he would have. He would come to our Bible college and bring us apples and oranges. And Brother Roloff went home to be with the Lord in 1982. But I had the privilege to get to know him a little bit, not very much, just seeing him in the hallways and stuff. But yeah, so it's been a good trip for me. It's been a very good trip for me.
Do you have one of my favorite preachers to listen to from the past is Dr. Jack Hiles?
Yes, sir.
Do you
Absolutely.
have any stories about Dr. Jack Hiles?
Well, first time I ever picked Dr. Hiles up at the airport, I'd taken him back and forth to the airport 9 different times. And I picked him up one time at the airport, and I was very quiet. I was just really, honestly, kind of scared, a little bit of fear there. Yeah, he was such an awesome preacher, and I felt so honored to pick him up. I wanted to do everything right. And he looked over to me and he said, "Son," he said, "don't you have any questions at all?" And I said, "No, sir." He said, "Look, when you have me, you ought to be asking me questions." I said, "Yes, sir." And so when I took him back after he got done preaching, I'd had a secretary to, it used to be they would have these printers that would print out, and they'd have lines down the side, and perforations in between the papers. And so when you did that, all the papers would fall down. And I had a whole line of just nothing, just stuff just typed out, ABCs, they just typed anything, And so he got into the vehicle and he said, "Now, do you have any questions?" I said, "Yes, sir, I do." I went like that, about 10 pages unfolded and went down. He said, "You have to be kidding me." And I said, "Yes, sir, I am. I only have 3 questions." He said, "Oh, I like that. I like that." He said, "Would you like to come to my room and we could fellowship a little bit?" And we got to do that, and he liked hot dogs. Every time he'd preach, he'd want hot dogs, take to his hotel room. And, he was a phenomenal preacher. He made it very evident, his walk with God made it very evident the need for people to know God on a personal basis. And that's what I learned from Dr. Hiles, is to be able to know God. It was evident in his preaching. It was evident in his life. It was evident in his church. When you got around him, you knew he loved God.
And any final word?
I appreciate what you're doing. I love you. Thank you for having me in your church. Thank you for becoming a new friend. I appreciate that so very much. I really do. And I think that people need to get to know you. I think that'd be a tremendous thing. And I appreciate you putting this together. If I can be a help to any other preachers or any other Christians, I certainly want to be able to do that. And of course, they can contact me at parksidebaptistchurch.org. They could email, or they could call the church, or anything like that. But thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for the honor of sitting down with you, just chatting for a little bit. That means the world to me.
Yeah,
thank you.
It was wonderful. Thank you.